I'm popping my live bubble. So thank you for your patience today. I'm so excited to do this. Can't you tell in my tone here? Also because I also am grateful because I am the founder of Random Act on LinkedIn, the initiative. And today, my dear colleague on LinkedIn, it's her Do One Give. So follow that today, hashtag Do One Give. And Jacqueline Way, this is a shout out to you. I believe in kindness and serving. And when I initially, a couple weeks ago, we started making some posts out there related to my, let's see here. Okay, I'm just going to close that off. So when I started making posts and trying to serve, and I was watching other people out there in my social media platforms, they're kind of holding their breath. And there's a lot of stress or a lot of wonder what to do and how to just and jive. And I started putting these posts out here. And one of them, I made a suggestion about what if we go live? Would you guys be interested in learning more on a topic around the stress and around how to just and jive? And so I got the answer was yes. And also I heard people out there saying, tired of all this positivity and let's telling us to get on with our big goals and we should just be growing leaps and bounds and all this stuff that us coaches do, right? Some of the coaches that are following here. And, it was like saying that, you just got to be in this bubble and you just got to pretend that nothing's happening. And that's not a good idea either. That doesn't help you create the things that are going to fit in this new era that we're moving into. So I wanted to think about how could I best serve? And that's what I'm doing today in a way that we don't look at, panicking or stressing out or going numb or ignoring. Hi, Angela. Good to see you. And that we don't just distract ourselves with wild OCD projects and get everything done on your to-do list, right? So I want to come with you kind of a balance and making sure everybody can hear me as we get going here is good. I'm so happy. Thank you for supporting me today. I got to lead by example, right? That's what leaders do. So while some of those things I shared, you might be going through, they may not be what's best for you. And so I thought about today, I wanted to run through a few ideas with you. Now, I have a few notes I'm going to reference, but I got to tell you what, I also want to work from inspiration. That's really important to me. In fact, this morning, I got up early and was collaborating on a few of my notes, and it started to feel this forcing that we're going to talk about here in a second. And hi, Irma. And it was feeling this like pressure, and it wasn't joyful. It was like, oh, now I'm trying to make it too complex. And I was adding this and adding that. And I went, wait, I got to do what I'm teach today, and I got to let it fit in the flow, and I got to step back and use the resistance to get into my zone, my power zone. And so I'm hoping you can feel that today as well. So I'm going to get started here, and what we're going to talk about here is about popping our bubbles, okay? Good. All right. Awesome. And thank you, Joseph, for saying that you can hear me again. I appreciate that. And what we're going to do is the way to overcome these stressful times that I'm going to speak about today is not to get over them, okay, or jump out of the boat and freak out. It is to move through them. That's what we're going to speak about today. So why am I qualified to speak about this? I actually want to do a TED Talk someday about this. Whoever's listening out there in TED Talk land, this is a call out to you. And I am qualified because, as I mentioned in the post, the details for today is that I've been through a lot of life and death experiences, very stressful experiences. Some of you may know my story. And I've been through some plain, just unfair, crappy ones. And I bet a lot of you have been through some of those as well. I know I'm not alone at that. And right now, these times can feel very much that way for yourself and for a lot of people around you. And so I don't want to make light of that at all right? I know that there are some tragedies and we want to hold them and that do one give space today and love and serve with kindness those that we know that have been affected in our communities that are supporting this. And I want to move into how I found a way and discovered a way to leverage these really stressful experiences that I've had in my life and use them for fuel for my dreams, and how I've been able to do that. So the idea that I wanted to share with you today is that, have you ever popped a can of soda? Have you ever uncorked a champagne and poured it in a glass? And you feel those little bubbles come up, right? You feel those little bubbles come up, and they're bursting with energy, and they can even go on your face if you put your face next to them or something. As a kid, I know I used to do that, although not champagne at the time, right? And those bubbles are releasing this energy, and they're bursting from within. And when I was thinking about the stress that's bubbling up for people and how to respond to this new environment that we're in, I got me curious about that. And I decided to do some research. And what makes bubbles pop? What makes them rise, right? So I do some research with that. And so it got me curious. And I shared this in the video yesterday, but let me just re-share that, in that bubbles rise from pressure. As they ascend, there is a constant fight. Think about that. They fight with the forces that are acting on them, but it is through the seeking of finding its place that both the water and the air can act differently to achieve their life's goal, equilibrium. Everything in this universe seeks equilibrium. The bubble can't leave the water unless it moves through and releases at the top. When things around us change, like right now, all this pressures and changes we're going through, the force can become a powerful catalyst, pushing us until we rise and rise and rise, until we reach the top, where we enter a new equilibrium, basically an atmosphere that's new that we've created by our rise, and this becomes our new identity. And in these times, we are in right now, the status that we're in right now, they can provide us the same opportunity. I'm not going to go woo-woo out there and expect you not to deal with the stress. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But if we understand how to work with the forces of stress and the power of confidence, we too can use that energy of fitting in and absorbing the space for our benefit and rise. So I'm going to check in for a second before I get going. Who's joined us since I started? Because I definitely want to make this interactive, though I have a few things to cover. Angela, you talk about you love that fuel for your dreams. Love it. Thank you. Robert. Hey, Robert. Nice for you to join us. Love the bubbles metaphor. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes, please do contribute. I'm going to go through a few things with you, and then I want to lean in, and I want to be able to answer your questions. We can dive in, we can strategize and so forth. I just have maybe about 10 minutes worth of some information to share with you, and then I'll be happy to make sure that I reach in during that and support you, because that's what I'm here to do, to serve and offer kindness. So excited. Thank you for letting me pop my bubble today. Okay, so let's get back to this. Let's begin with talking about stress, that nasty 5-letter word, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How to count that one out. So stress is not necessarily bad for us. It can serve a purpose. It demonstrates for us that the resistance, the force, can actually use that to push ourselves up and to restrict and to push back, and restrict and push back. So let's think about this in a couple quick examples for you. What about meeting a deadline? Have you ever used stress to meet a deadline? Who's done that? Put that in the chat below that you have. Have you ever okay, I'm not motivated, but if I kind of wait for it, I'm going to get into that mode and get going, and all of a sudden you have your best creative energy. That's one way that you fill the space and use the stress to leverage and put that pressure on you to rise up to meet the demand. How about losing weight? You know, the stress, the pressure is getting on that scale, or if you can't button your pants, or whatever it is for you, right? And that stress then starts to motivate you to want to lean in, and it depends on how much stress you need and how much resistance you need to actually start doing something about it. I like to liken this to uh, violin. I played violin growing up for 7 years. Yes, I did. And you know, a violin, you have to tighten your strings just right. And here's why. Because if you don't tighten them enough, then what you need to do is you have to push with your bow. You have to push harder to create the same sound. And as you're pushing harder, it doesn't sound as beautiful, and it sounds rigid, and the rosin on your bow gets rubbed off faster, and it doesn't allow for the beautiful music. But if you actually tighten it just right, it springs back up, and when your bow goes on it, then it actually allows it to glide across the strings and make beautiful music. Are you seeing this metaphor I'm sharing, the resistance and the expansion? Hi, Randall, I'm glad you're here. Thank you. I just saw that. I got to get down there. Thanks for joining. And Robert, you were saying that, yeah, that means that's what gives me even more weight. Okay, so you're getting what I'm talking about here. Good. So let's move into the disadvantages, though. When stress becomes the motivating factor, you tend to build up a tolerance to it. And it takes more and more in order for it to do its part. All right, it doesn't work in that beautiful balance where the water and the air are moving in symphony with each other, so that they have that yin and yang to create that end equilibrium that they both desire. You start having to need more and more, and what happens opposite is that if you suppress those bubbles, they actually move down deeper and deeper and deeper in the water, making it more difficult for that whole mathematical process, scientific process to happen. Same thing with stress. In fact, the Mayo Clinic, they talk about that stress is like 80% of their doctor visits, and I imagine that's probably gone up with this going on, unfortunately. People come in, it's due to stress. But guess what, guys? Stress is not an illness. It's not. It is a reaction to how we are responding to the environment around us. And so with that, we want to talk about is that you're not going to be stress-free. Sorry, you're not going to be stress-free. We need some of that, like I just demonstrated that, okay? We got to be realistic. It's more about managing your reactions of stress. What does it say here? Angela, stress spelled backwards is desserts. Okay, I like it. That's actually cute. Very, very good. Now, the fact that we're here today, I imagine that you've been feeling a little stressed. The topic that I said, let's reduce stress and let's increase confidence, spoke to you. And I also imagine that you're willing to look at this time in your life as a way to self-evaluate. So what I want you to do as I go through this next couple sections here is to consider today, as we go through this, what are the toxins on you? What are those toxins of stress that are bearing down you and keeping you from rising up and using that power inside of that bubble that we'll talk about here more in a second? And some of you, okay, some of you, this may be the first time you've got to choose how to use your time in a long time. When we went into the self-quarantine, I was hearing all that talk out there on social media. Were you too? Of, oh my gosh, how am I going to use my time? And yet, how many of you have typically felt like your plate is full and you never have enough time? Man, so isn't that kind of ironic, right? And not knowing how to use your time, ironically, can cause anxiety and stalling. So how can we get confidence back so that you can trust your powerful self, your sense of purpose in this time? Let me share with you my story. I mentioned in the beginning about my life and death in different situations. I'm not going to go through all of them. We won't have time for that. Sorry, I call myself a cat, that I have 9 lives. I've landed on my feet, and I've probably used 7 of them so far, okay? But I am going to share one of them to give you an example of that flow, ebb and flow of not using the stress in the way that can help you rise and instead suppressing. And what happens when you learn to work in a fitting it in and leverage it to reach your goals. So, I'm my story in my book, and I speak about this often on stages I've been interviewed, is I'm a domestic violence survivor, okay? And I say that because I'm a champion, not just a survivor. And that experience ironically taught me a lot. Yes, it was back in the 90s, and hence my book is called Leaving Your Comfort Zone, because I had to actually eventually identify the comfort zone I was in that had me be in that relationship for nearly 15 years. Now, when I was able to escape, we won't get into all those other details, but I want to share an example of stalling and anxiety and see if you can liken this to some area of your life for a second. In that, when I was in the grocery store after I went through this, it was very early on, it's probably within the first week or so. And mind you, I had moved to another town. I never lived there before. I didn't have any family, didn't have any friends. When we got there, no place to live. And all those things I had to go through that I talk more about in my book as well. But I had to venture out and feed my children. And I had 2 young daughters at the time. And I remember taking them to the grocery store. A simple task, right? Simple task in itself, right? And I remember that what happened was I was pushing the cart through the grocery store and up and down the aisles, yet my cart wasn't getting full. And my kids were kind of distracting and saying, hey, what are we going to get? We're going to get this. And I remember I started clutching onto the cart and I started feeling this sense of anxiety. And at one point, I literally stood there, frozen, paralyzed with indecision and fear. I couldn't decide what to buy. And I started to cry. And then I gathered up my children, left the cart there in the middle of the aisle, and went out to my car and went home. And in that moment, what had happened with that is that I had that choice, and I wasn't strong enough at the time with my confidence. And in essence, my bubble popped too early. Okay, bubbled too early. And I had come so codependent. I had these coping mechanisms. Sorry, I told you this is live, and I'm learning from inspiration here too, leaning in. I had so many coping mechanisms that I had learned over time. And you know what? I realized later on that I was doing all these things to please somebody else. And I was making choices in that confined environment of stress of what somebody else wanted to eat, my ex, right? And I knew how to please and how to do it in that when I got free from that very severe container, I didn't know how to buy groceries. Crazy, huh? But that's kind of likened to what maybe some people around you are feeling that maybe have past experience of stress. They might be having some PTSD like I had, or they just might be playing fish out of water. So, in their situation, not knowing how to react. It's a really real thing, right? Now, let's fast forward really quick. I fought through the years. I kept fighting and resisting, not leveraging it. Okay, let's be honest here. And that became exhausting and traumatic because I didn't know how to use the resistance. Okay. And again, I had come to understand my memorized self. So think for a second to yourselves over there. Has this new environment you're in allowed you to maybe challenge? Maybe haven't talked to yourself in that term, but think about it. Do you have a memorized self? Kind of go through the motions, alarm goes off, you get up, drink your coffee, whatever it is, jump in the shower, take your dog out, whatever it is. Have you been in a memorized self? And now all of a sudden you're discovering during this time, oh my gosh, I get to choose new routines. I need to adapt because there's not enough people around me. Maybe you're in the office and people have had to be home instead and you're taking up more. And that's another way you're adapting to the routine. But we come so conditioned as human beings. We are natural, what do I want to say? Habitors, if you will, with that. And so for me, what happened is I grew and I tested the waters as I grew. And I discovered some key things I'm going to share with you here that absolutely work if you listen to these. And what happened as I grew and I was testing these waters is that I changed the density around me. Remember back in the beginning, I said regarding the water and the bubbles, is that they both are seeking, it is through the seeking of finding its place that both the water and the air can act differently to achieve their goals. So through my seeking and my evolving, I started to test these waters and I started to feel the space differently. So quick trajectory of my bubble. Okay, like that, of my bubble up to the top. Okay. Hey, Sean, good to have you here. I just noticed you here. Awesome. So that grocery store story, resistance, fight, 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 eventually had me in the courtroom. In the courtroom like a mama bear. And I write about this too in my book. And facing the judge and my ex and speaking to the judge from that mama bear perspective. Yes, from a mama bear's perspective. And doing what my attorney, the ones that were protecting me and my children, were the DA, unfortunately, they weren't able to prosecute the 4 felony counts because somebody forgot to cross the T and dot the I, and we missed the statute of limitations by 180 days. That's another part of my rising, another part of my bubble. And what it did is it found me that I'm putting my energy, I'm using that resistance, I'm using that pressure, that disappointment, that stress, and I'm going to find a way to use it and leverage it. And I put myself back to school online and got some courses at Lincoln Law School to where I found myself in the courtroom. And you know what happened? Talking like a mama bear, I won. Yes, I won, and I got the toughest protection for me and my children. From there, guess what I did? I used that resistance, okay? And I started to actually then sit in the courtroom working through an organization called WEAVE, Women Escaping a Violent Environment. And I started to sit with the women and help them find their beautiful voice and have the courage. And that was easier. I was rising, okay? So the trajectory and the resistance of that got easier as I started to rise up. From there, I continued to serve and teach, where I eventually met some beautiful women who had different stories and what we call our Shiro stories. And we got together and back in 2011-ish roughly, and we started Shiro's United. Yes, where we help women overcome, and also now men, well, we've been doing that for years, overcome these obstacles, whether it be domestic violence or sex trafficking or women warriors or different things, so they can become Shiros in their own lives and the lives of their children and their communities, all the way to today, where I'm at today, and now have an international presence out there with Shiros United, as well as my different platforms. Can you see? I could break down all of that water pushing on me, okay? I'm the air bubble, okay? And I could break down every one of those experiences. But what I did in that is I pushed. And as I started to do that, I started to recognize that there were some things that I was absorbing. I started to transform it. I started to recognize it doesn't have the power over me. Did I still experience stress? Yes. But I absorbed it differently. And you know what happened in that? I started to trust and transform it to where eventually those past experiences, I got to stand on the shoulders of them and use them to rise to the top and pop. And all that beautiful energy inside of those bubbles, right? All that energy that you feel when it pops on your cheek and you're celebrating when you pull the cork, that whole distribution of it started to come out and become something beautiful. So can you do this? Here's what I learned. Let me just check in, see what other questions and comments before I get into the strategies here. You guys are so patient to hang on here with me. Thank you. I just love and appreciate you all. Seriously. Robert, thank you so much for saying that. I'm glad that you're finding it. Thank you, Angela. You guys are awesome. Thank you. So let's get into, through discovery, I identified through my trajectory, okay, that this yin and yang that was happening, this feeling in the space and what was going on, is identified there were 4 key elements that were taking place. And when I paid attention to this cycle, then I noticed this in others, and I started to document it. And then I started to develop a system. In fact, my book, Leaving Your Comfort Zone, it was first published as an ebook just on this one chapter that I'm going to talk about today. And I started to develop these confidence blockers, okay? So now I'm telling you about the strategy of how do you use the water, the pressure, the stress to rise to the top and not pop too soon and miss out on that momentum that trajectory can give you. And over 10 years training on this and using this with my clients and using with corporate, going in and teaching, oh my gosh, this is so powerful with team building and with exercises with leadership. But again, I'm here to serve, not sell today, okay? Let's talk about those confidence blockers that will give you that bounce back. So the water is that pressure, the stress, whatever's going on in your environment today or in your lives, like I had, right? And then the blockers is what gives you that bounce back. Now, they work for you or against you. I'm going to tell you about this in a second here. So what are the 4 confidence blockers? Confidence blockers are insidious success barriers that control the decision you make and the way that you'll react to various situations. They are, 1, your fears, but there are 4 fears. I'm going to lightly go through those. Your internal barriers, that probably doesn't surprise you. Hey, Jill, thank you for joining in. Awesome. They are lack of assertiveness and lack of self-care. Now, let's break those down just for a second, and thanks for hanging in there, guys. And you may not recognize these when they're happening in your life in the first stage. You might recognize them later on when you're already in maybe one down in the trajectory, because I find that they go in order: fear, thoughts, lack of assertiveness, lack of self-care, and they create this vicious cycle. All right. And but after you've gone through it enough and you start to pay attention, you can find that these typically work for you or work against you. Now, I'm going to show really quick here. Let's break those down. You guys ready? Let's break those down a little bit today. I promised a couple of things for you today. All right, so excited. And yes, look what I'm getting here. Look all the tabs. I still use my book to today. Absolutely. So I'm going to flip real here so I can keep, because I could talk all day about this, and I want to keep in the constraints of this and give you some positive feedback. So here's what I want to do for you is this. Let's talk about these first. The first one is about fears. And one of the things with that is that fears themselves are absorbing. They're absorbing the power. So now you think about inside of that bubble, there's a lot of gases, there's a lot of energy in there. And if that bubble stays down longer, it actually gets bigger. Okay, it gets bigger. So it's absorbing all that, and that makes it heavier, harder the weight to get up to the top in doing that. And it's harder to have that interaction between the stress and the power that you have. But when you're able to recognize the fears, you can capture its energy and turn it into power, because that's all it is. It's displaced power, okay? Now, just in giving you a quick little 4. Want to know what the 4 are today? Yes? You want to know what they are? Okay. Number 1 is assumptions. Now, an assumption fear is based on something that you perceived happened in the past, or a belief that something is true even without proof. All right, so these are perceptions of the experience, and you presume it will happen again. Are you feeling any of those assumptions right now in your environment with what's happening, whether it be in your job or with your family or your kids or your career, the business owners and what's going to happen in reopening your business? I mean, there's probably some of that going on, okay? The next one in that of fear, number 2 fear, is interpretations. How is that different than assumptions? Your reality is a story that's being told inside of your head based on the previous experiences and your current state of mind. Yet to you right now, it feels like the absolute truth. Do you ever have a story that goes around and around in your head and you just know it's going to happen, but maybe you show up in the situation and it doesn't? What a waste of lost opportunity and energy and time, right? With that, what is the third fear, element of fear? This is your gremlins as we call it in your coaching world. And a gremlin is a term for the embodiment of self-belief that was created in the past. And it's made up of deep-rooted fears and negative personal messages about ourselves, ones we have worked very hard to reinforce and hold on to because we've learned to see them as our truth, right? We've learned to see them and hold us so tight, and we've learned to see them as our truth. The fourth fear that a lot of us are probably dealing with right now actually is outer challenges. And sometimes our fear of action is based on outside circumstances that we feel unable to control or fully understand. We feel these are blocking us from achieving our goal, and some of our fears are related to the outer challenges. Now, the key here is to look at them and interpret them. Are they irrational ones or are they rational? And that's what the challenge on fears as I leave you with is looking at that. And journaling is a great way to break down and ascertain, is it true or is it not? Is it useful or is it not? Let's go into the second confidence blocker. Hope you guys are enjoying this so far and this is bringing you value, okay? The second confidence blocker is internal barriers. And guys, if there is one skill that you can absolutely master that would make a difference in your life, and I know it's made a difference in my life and the lives of my clients, with that is learning how to talk to yourself from your power zone or your higher self, okay? In fact, don't just take my word from it. Harvard did a study several years ago, and they interviewed over 300,000 top 10% income earners. And they asked them, and I'm paraphrasing this really quick, they asked them, why do you think you're in that income bracket? How many of you want to be in that 10% income earning bracket, right? And they asked them, how did you get there? And when they combined all the information together, here's what they said, that they thought about what they wanted and how to get there most of the time. They thought about what they wanted and how to get there most of the time. Okay, so that must mean that they're having to do this, right? They're having to push off of the stress as they're going in their trajectory to get there. It doesn't happen without that. Those big juicy goals are going to have those, but you think about it, right? And you push against them and you think about how to get there and you make sure that that fills your brain and you look at ways to check out if you're having thought stopping, all those words, negativity. If you spent one day just documenting your language, I bet you'd find a lot of resistance that's pushing you away from your opportunity instead of helping you bounce back and use it for your benefit. Okay. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about here is lack of assertiveness. This is a big one, and you're probably feeling this as well during these times because this comes from lack of self-honor and claiming your self-worth. My time management program is a self-honoring approach to managing time because it's about learning about your best value and using your best value and the ways that are going to serve you and your strengths. And that's also how you rise up and making sure you're using your leadership at its best value as well and delegate down. Okay, but that's for another discussion, right? And some of the things that I see that happens with this is that, did you know that the number one way professionals will get in their comfort zone will be for lack of managing their time? That's the fastest way you'll get back in your comfort zone. If you're not in the driver's seat managing your time, in essence, your life. The second way that I find in doing this process and learning this over the years is not speaking up, not using your voice, having courageous conversations and sharing your value and sharing your dreams and sharing your needs and your wants and collaborating and working together. That's so valuable, so important to do. And one of the reasons that I find that you don't use your assertiveness is because you are not honoring your values. And interesting is when you're in this off time during this self-quarantine and you're looking around you, what do I do with my time? How many of you felt weird? Like I said in the beginning, felt awkward, felt weird and not sure what to do. Some of you might be like, oh, this is, odd, or some of you might just get back into your normal routines and habits and not take it as a chance to actually practice and look at where in your life has the busyness of your life that's been maybe the priority, maybe not, but maybe the priority, where has it taken over? And instead, where can you now look at the areas of your life that you value that haven't been getting the attention they deserve? See, values, they shape our decisions. They're our number one core driving, motivating factor, not morals, but our values. And when we are not feeling, like we can be assertive, we can claim it, then we're suppressing. And you'll find that often hidden in routines and behaviors and tolerating things like this, right? You'll find yourself stuck. You'll find yourself, kind of discovering, maybe tipping a toe forward in the things you want to achieve and then falling backwards. That's a sign that you're not either understand your values, haven't claimed them yet, but you're not actually speaking them and honoring and owning your values. They're our fuel, guys. Our values are our fuel. So whatever you do during this time, take time to audit and assess what are your top 5 values and where in your life can you get better at utilizing these. And when this is all done and over with, how can you incorporate more of that in your life and what's truly important to you? So as you work to grow and develop and come out the top, you're bringing your strength, you're bringing your voice because your values are your voice. That's your leadership voice, is those values. Be able to communicate it. Oh, thank you guys. Thank you for sharing that. You guys on the chat here saying absolutely wonderful insights and tips. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad you're getting value here. Okay, good. Let's go into the 4th confidence blocker, and that is lack of self-care. How many of you have been wanting time off? Oh my gosh, I needed a vacation. I already been feeling that way before this came on, before the virus. And now that you have it, what was the first thing you went to? Where did you use your time when this first happened? Did you get busy being busy? Did you go into kind of a couch meditative state? I don't know. What did you do? Was your choice to practice self-care? What you've been craving and wanting, I imagine most of us, for a while, whether it be having more time each day or each week or on the weekend. What was your first choice? If it wasn't self-care, what does that tell you? Self-care is so important. This is where your story can change. This is where it's fuel, it's oil. This is where you build trust in yourself in that moment of having that peace and that time to honor yourself. And when you practice self-care, you become more of the embodiment of that effortlessness. Okay, so you get to come up more effortlessly as the bubble floats up. As I mentioned, as you learn this, you're going to probably fight a little bit. And it's not until you actually can relax and let it manifest itself. Like I did this morning, I was fighting it. I was like, oh, I need to tell them this, I need to tell them that, but I only have this much time. And it's my first live. What if it doesn't work? Right? So I'm like, wait a minute. And what did I do? I went into meditation. And I went into self-care and let it flow. Now, do I still have the stress of being here live with you? A little bit. But now I'm using it like the violin, okay? And I'm excited. And I'm going to listen to that. And I'm going to let it now allow that effortlessness to bounce off. See how I'm using it? It doesn't go away. I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it. And it gets easier as you do it. So as I mentioned, when you're in that state where it gets to be an embodiment of your desires, that's where you start to practice detachment. That's hard for a lot of us. Let me tell you, Carolyn Fernandez, I'm going to be part of her new book coming out, Becoming You, and you'll see I write in there about that. I have had it plagued most of my life. I learned this many years ago about not fair, fighting for my rights, okay? Right? That's one of my ways it was working against me with that. And when I learned to detach and I learned to do that, that's when I started to align to the flow. And that's where I started creating this positive resistance that helped me rise. But in order to do that, you got to trust yourself. You got to trust yourself. You got to let that water work for you and become more effortlessly. And my dear friend, my dear blessed soul sister, Anna Nicole Waters totally gets this. And she's been teaching me more of this and working on our projects together. I just love her dearly if she's on this. But it's, you become that water and you become that process works. Remember in the beginning, you seeking of finding its place. So that seeking, everybody does that for a minute. Just take a breath. And find that place, that evolution instead of resisting it. A lot of those things that you're fighting will fall off and they become then the momentum to push you up in your trajectory, in your water with that. Now, one of the things I find interesting, one of the fastest way to reduce stress and to build your confidence, which is actually one of the strategies to practice self-care, is to celebrate success. Do you know how many times I put that out there and people go, oh, I can't celebrate. Oh, mama taught me not to. Oh, that's a no-no. We can't toot our horn. We can't celebrate stress. Baloney. You know what? As a child, what are you doing all the time to your children? You're growing them up. You're acknowledging their strengths. You're giving them the flourishing, the oil, the juices of reminding them and reflecting to them their beauty, their gifts, their strengths, their love, all of this, so they can what? They can flourish. Why do we as adults forget to do that for ourselves and as leaders for those around us? In fact, I'm a firm believer that a leader who doesn't celebrate success is a leader not worth following. And I seriously mean that. In fact, when you go back after this sequester that we're in and you work with your teams, there's going to be a new era. And like it or not, there is an evolution, a transformation going on. And they're going to look to you for security, for support, for reassurance, get that stable ground. And the fastest way you can do that to build their confidence and squelch those items and having some okay, Randall's got to go, but the fastest way, I hope I'm not having technical issues. Randall, thank you for letting me know. I hope that you can see the replay. Okay, so the fastest way that you can suppress those is to acknowledge what they're doing right and to reflect to them the greatness you see in them. Celebrating success is free, and it's the most powerful gift you have as a leader. Now, so I want you to think for a minute. I'm going to be wrapping this up here in a second. I want to take some of your questions and ideas. Is that put yourself in the middle, okay? And around you are those 4 fears, internal barriers, the next ring, lack of assertiveness, the next ring, and lack of confidence. And those are the rings that you're in as you practice this resistance in your life to move to your higher level of embodiment, okay? And now the opposite is true. This is how, as I've demonstrated a few stories here, this is how you can use this, is that someone who's in touch with their personal power, and it's a learned process. I've had to grow into this, okay? And some situations is easier than others and so forth. And sometimes, it can be in the moment that it feels easier and sometimes it can feel harder, but this is what you can, when you pay attention, you can course correct quicker. So someone who's in touch with their personal power is able to champion their fears and use them as growth opportunities. They understand the influence of their self-talk and beliefs, and they demonstrate this through their assertiveness to take risks and show up. See how it's working oppositely? And they know that they're deserving of self-care. In essence, they use their awareness to push against and interact. And as they do this, they expand and they get reacquainted with the powerful self, absorbing all that power, making way and giving way as they move up and they become lighter and lighter, needing less and less of that resistance to get to the higher self, into their higher self here. No problem, Robert. I am about ready to wrap this up in a second. Thank you. No worries. Okay, so when an individual is not expressing their full level of confidence, they are not in tune or may have forgotten the power they possess. So it stays in the bubble, all that power, instead of getting to the top and popping and then absorbing all of that power inside of there. And that bubble then is created around them is their comfort zone. So in closing here, I just want to kind of tie this up and see what questions you have. Is because our fears manifest themselves and they influence our actions and they suppress our growth and they validate our negative self-talk and our harmful beliefs, and that in turn fuels more fears, then it becomes this vicious cycle. And people are less likely to assert themselves and take that risk, and they may often feel very unworthy, not good enough to celebrate or to take care of themselves. And those blockers then start working against them, inhibiting their confidence and preventing sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. People are making comments over here. Sorry about that. Their ability to leave their comfort zone. Confidence blockers hinder you to take that necessary risk, right? To take that. And they hinder true success in all areas in your life. And all too often, I see that if left unchecked and left to their own devices, they take a life of their own, resulting into your comfort zone where that negative self-talk can thrive, and there's no risk-taking, and as a result, no progress. All right, so have I demonstrated today the value of recognizing when one of those blockers are forward? And if you recognize one, just even one, you can drill back and start to address the other ones, because they're usually start from fears. And if you notice it at lack of self-care, then jump into fears and start dissecting it till you can close the gap and you can reverse it. You can recognize your fears. You can pay attention to your thoughts and redirect them. And you can then, practice being assertive and claiming your value and what you want to bring forward in this world. And then you can celebrate your successes and go forward. So self-confidence, as I've demonstrated here, hopefully will teach you how to practice and push against that resistance and use it for you when you're in the battle that we're in right now with all the stress around us. And it's going to continue, hopefully, play a crucial part of your life and determining as you go forward, as you embody this message, happiness and success throughout your life. And so that's what I have prepared today. I'm sorry if it took a little longer getting this inspiration out. I wanted to do this out of love and service. And I hope you got a lot from this today. Let me look over here. Do you have any last minute questions or thoughts from this? I wanted to keep it under an hour, and we're about 51 minutes here. And I know a few of you have had to jump off. That's okay. I respect that. I'll post the replay. Is there any one thing that you took away or you have any questions for me? I would love to hear. Let's see here. Thank you, Angela, for that. Thank you. I'm so glad. Hey, Ali Nicole. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. I love that you're getting much value from this. Good, good, good. Randall says, thanks for the wonderful insights. I know that you were having some technical difficulty earlier. Robert said, awesome stuff. Thank you. Thank you. Jill, no problem. You can check out that. So I know that Joseph and Terry may have been on, but I don't know if they're actually in this particular feed. I'm trying to see all the messages here. So, okay, awesome. Please do me a favor, do yourself a favor, put any questions or thoughts in the comment. If you love this, put it in here on Facebook. And if you're following me on LinkedIn, would you please go and make some comments there as well so that people can come back and they can get value from this service that I'm trying to provide today with this. If you want to learn more about this, I break these down in great detail and tell you a lot of different action items very tangible action items in my book. You can grab a copy on Amazon, and you can always reach out to me on my website. I have some complimentary resources. So again, not trying to sell, just know I'm here to love and serve, and I believe in this power, and I believe that, leaders, your most important charge right now is to be courageous and to be optimistic, and those are powerful traits. And this process I talked to you about today, take some time and decide how you can use it, and don't just get over it and say, whatever, I'll just get through this. Instead, move through it, and rise, feeling that energy, that space to become your powerful self through this process. Sean, excellent. I love that you're getting value that you can use in your personal and business. Thank you for sharing. That's so good. I'm so happy to have you here. Okay, well, thank you for joining me on my very first Facebook Live. Would you like me to do another one of these? I'll get better at them. Hopefully I'll have a little less time. I want to keep them by here. The best is to keep them under an hour, maybe even less, but I spent a little extra time today because I had technical difficulties getting in, but that's okay. It became my pressure to do a good job today. So we're going to use that, take it for what it is, and know that I love serving here. This social media platform has been such a gift to get my voice out there. That is my why, for myself, and also helping leaders empower them so they can find their voice, so they can achieve the visions they never thought possible. So with that said, I'm going to jump off and say, to the power in you, Renee Johnson here, the Power Zone Coach. Have a fabulous day. Look forward to hearing from you. Bye.